Everyone makes mistakes, and one of the most common Python mistakes is a syntax error, which is invalid code that the Python interpreter just doesn't understand. The interpreter finds syntax errors before you're even able to run the program, and it gives you some hints on how to fix them. And it takes some practice dealing with syntax errors, but eventually you get the hang of them and learn how to fix them quickly. A runtime error is an error that crashes your program while it's running. The Python interpreter does not detect a runtime error because the program's syntax is correct, but when the program tries to attempt an illegal operation such as dividing by 0 or multiplying strings together rather than concatenating them or adding them, then a runtime error happens. Then your program will crash and halt execution, and all the lines of code that follow will never get executed. So that's another type of error that you'd like to avoid. And finally, there's also logic errors. Making a logical mistake in your code is a logic error, such as multiplying when you should have added instead. So the interpreter doesn't detect these as well because it doesn't produce a syntax error, it doesn't produce a runtime error, it just simply produces wrong output when you run your program. There's a few other different types of errors not shown on the slide, but there's indentation errors. So when you learn about branching and looping, you'll notice that certain code that belongs to the branch or loop has to be indented properly, or code that belongs within a function. There's also value errors. That's when you pass the wrong value to a function, such as like the int function. If you pass the string literal 5, F-I-V-E, rather than the number 5, that'll give you a value error. There's name errors. That's when the program tries to use a variable that does not exist. And type errors. That's when an incorrect type is used, such as adding a string to an integer. Let's try out all these examples and see how they look in Python. First thing we're going to do is try to create a syntax error. So let's say you had a variable age equals 5. All right, no problem there, but if you try to say age is 5 plus 1. Oh, look at that. It underlines it, tells you got a syntax error, and it tells you on the bottom left-hand corner, expected type int got str string instead. Okay, so that's a syntax error. Another syntax error is adding a semicolon by mistake at the end of a statement. I mean, that's common in Java, but there's no semicolons at the end of your statement in Python. All right, next let's try to do a runtime error. So let's say we ask the user for their age. Print, how old are you? And the user is going to type their age, and we're going to store that as, we're going to get that from input. And because age is an integer, we don't want it to be stored as a string, so let's wrap that input with a string function like this. All right, cool. And now let's print out print you are age years old. Let's try that out. How old are you? 5. You are 5 years old. Prints out on the console. Let's run that again, and because it's trying to convert whatever input we type to an integer, what if we type something like 5, F-I-V-E? It can't really convert that text to an integer, can it? So let's press enter, and the program crashes. That is a runtime error. We're getting a value error, invalid literal for int with base 10, 5, whatever that means. But just know that that's a runtime error. Your program crashed, and it never printed out what your age is at the end. Also, a logic error is just simply just some kind of wrong calculation or logic in your program. So if it's your birthday, you can print out happy birthday and add 1 to age. So if you're 5, it's your birthday, you're now 6 years old. But what if you didn't add 1 to age? What if you added 2 to age? So if you're 5 and it's your birthday, you don't become 7. This is a logic error. If we try to print out a variable that doesn't exist, that is called a name error. So instead of printing out age, let's print out name. Name doesn't exist, and right away we're getting an error. So let's fix that. And a type error is when you're trying to mix like integers and strings together, for example. So instead of adding 1, let's add the string 1. And that program crashes, giving you a type error. Finally, let's talk about indentation errors. So let's just check, and this is something you're going to learn when you learn about branching in Python. If age is greater than or equal to 16, and notice when I pressed enter, it kind of indented it automatically. We can print you are old enough to drive. So if you are 50, you're old enough to drive. But what if I remove that indentation? Oh, the program crashes and we get an indentation error. So everything that belongs to this if-else statement must be indented so that Python knows that it belongs to this if statement. And we'll learn more about that in a future video about branching. And that's all. Thanks for watching.